What's the most fucked up thing someone has told you about themselves after barely getting to know them? A customer explained to me the benefits of a coffee enema to heal everything from my acne to preventing cancer for an hour. I couldn't get her to leave me alone because it was dead and no one was there to help. I worked for a skincare counter in a department store. Like, if you don't need my products because cleaning your ass with coffee fixes it, why are you here? But she went on about how she started her kids on these and did their enemas until they could do theirs on their own. What? Then she also grabbed my hands and kept saying, "Promise me you'll try it. Promise me." She left after I promised. No, I didn't try it. I made the unfortunate mistake of inviting my old neighbor over when we were having a party. He had like 5 gins in my kitchen and confessed to an unsolved murder in Nunavut, Canada. He's in jail. A guy told me during our first shift that his youngest daughter was suicidal, his eldest daughter's boyfriend was terribly abusive, and his wife was sleeping with someone at her work. Apparently he'd just gotten out of jail after flying home from out of state, beating the shit out of his daughter's boyfriend, his brothers, and his dad, driving to his wife's work and beating the shit out of her boyfriend, then driving to the hospital to hold his daughter's hand after she had attempted suicide until the cops arrived to arrest him for aggravated assault. Hitchhiking through New Zealand, I got picked up by a semi-driver. Awesome guy, but an hour into the drive started unloading every bit of personal information he could. How he's cheated on his wife, screwed the company out of money, stolen items. It was like I was a priest in a confession booth. When I asked him why he told me all of that, he said it's been eating him up inside for years and telling me helped get it off of his chest. He said I had no idea who he or anyone he knew was, so it felt like I was the perfect person to unload on. Had to get my picture taken for a visa, so went to a local photography shop that took the pictures and printed them out for you right there. I had been talking to the guy as he worked on other people's photos, and when I finally got my picture taken he started opening up about his family. Apparently his son was killed 3 years ago in a car accident, and he was telling me how much I reminded him of his son, going to school for engineering, first-generation college student, etc. The son was killed in his senior year, so didn't even get to graduate. He even showed me pictures. It was heartbreaking. To make things worse, he said he had a degenerative muscular disease and doctors had given him about 2 to 3 years before he'd be bedridden. He then went on to say his daughter was taking care of him and how she isn't married yet and deserves to live a young person's life, and man, it really put into perspective how bad some people have it. I still think about that guy to this day and hope he's doing well. I met a guy once at work. We talked for about 5 minutes and he was suspiciously way too nice. After a few minutes later, and just to give me context, he told me he had attempted suicide several times and that he could be violent sometimes. We kept talking like it was nothing for like 15 more minutes. During all the conversation he never stopped smiling. My favorite ever was some stranger outside a bar. Seemed normal enough until she said, "My husband and I used to do meth, but we don't anymore." I applauded her on this, and then she followed up with, "Yeah, now we only have meth weekends." Yesterday I was walking with a friend of a friend after my friend left me. He started telling me benefits of NoFap and his pervertness out of nowhere, like telling me how it had affected him and his life personally. He told me how he masturbated in a train sitting with all his friends in such a way nobody noticed. Then he goes on telling me how he asked his father for help, for which his father asked him to drink buttermilk because apparently it reduces the addiction. Used to work at a ski resort and was working in a different area than I normally work. Well, this lady who I was working with found out I was slightly acquainted with her fiancé and proceeded to tell me all about how his family hates her and is mean to her, and all about his substance abuse issues. I don't remember all the details because it was a few years ago, but she unloaded on me with every issue of her relationship, and I'm like, I'm just here to work. I didn't really even know her fiancé. I avoided that lady after that. New roommate told me her current boyfriend got kicked out of college for sexual assault and was under investigation for another case of sexual assault. Wanted my opinion about it within like 2 hours or meeting. Completely disregarded that my opinion was run. I was buying an AC at Home Depot during Black Friday sales. There were none on the shelf, so an employee was helping me get the display model. He carried it all the way to the cashier for me. I thanked him and wished him a happy holiday season. A shadow crossed his face and he looked me straight in the eye and told me he killed someone a year ago during the holidays. He ran a man over and killed him. It was ruled an accident, but he said he won't ever celebrate a holiday again because of that. Edit to add more info and answer a couple questions. I thought the employee was fucking with me as well. I did some searching online when I got home and found the news article, and he did indeed hit and kill a man. It was a super raining evening and just starting to get dark. The person killed was heavily intoxicated and veered into the oncoming traffic. Started talking to a homeless guy outside of the grocery store. Learned he was fresh out of prison for shooting his brother who had slept with his ex-wife. I was a teenager working retail and there was a fidgety older woman I worked with. I was always very nice to her, but she was just a co-worker at the end of the day. One day she told me about her grandpa molesting her when she was young. Her parents didn't believe her, so it continued until he died. She said she was glad he died and was happy at his funeral. I really had no clue what to say since this was out of nowhere. I just said I was really sorry it had happened. Felt really bad for her because I could tell it still really bothered her. This guy I'd worked with for a couple days told me he had been meeting older men at a state park and having sex for money. We worked at an upscale deli. Lady at work started telling me about land she owned in another state that is not part of America. She then started talking about how every American is a bond to the government, and your SSN is just your bond number. Wealthy people own those bonds and own you. She started naming off prices of bonds based off people's races and genders. This was all said after I simply asked her what she was doing with her long weekend coming up. Oh, I have another one. Girl I worked with but didn't really know beyond her name. Told me she liked to hold her boyfriend's penis and do the aiming for him when he took a piss. That he broke in and beat the shit out of a guy who raped his daughter, put the guy in the hospital, with a baseball bat. I totally get why he did it, but I have no idea why he thought it was a good story to tell a new co-worker. This happened to my wife. We had just moved into a new house and the lady next door came over to introduce herself to my wife. As she was talking, she informed my wife that her husband was mad at her because she had farted when he was going down on her. Started to work with my co-worker, he kept falling asleep on me. On day 2 I asked him if he was okay because he constantly falls asleep. He tells me he has insomnia. Makes sense, I feel bad for the guy. An hour goes by, he nods off again. This is scary cause he's a driver, I yell wake up. He jolts awake, goes back to driving, apologizes. Then begins telling me what happened and why he can't sleep. About 10 years ago he was going through a divorce. Apparently his daughter's bedroom got broken into and she was raped and beaten nearly to death at age 15. The assailant went to the mother's bedroom and murdered her. A couple of weeks later they found the guy while he, the father, was taking care of his daughter. Shot multiple times and murdered in a random town nearby somewhere in a ditch. He goes on to say the cops arrested him right away since he was the #1 suspect, questioning him about the situation, to which he had no clue to what they were going on about. He had to get a lawyer and after a few days of questioning they had to release him because they had no evidence that it was him. His voice changed when he told me this, and while he said he was a friend of the family's, I wonder what happened to him. Guess we will never know, but they got nothing on me. In a more menacing voice, after a long pause it seemed like he caught himself and turned to me and said back in his original funky sweet voice, but I wasn't anywhere near, so I don't know how they did suspect me for it, and that's why I have trouble sleeping every night for the last 10 years. I just got chills and thought to myself, holy fuck, you did it, didn't you? We were 17, first year of uni, and I had known the guy for a week or two tops. Out of fucking nowhere, he tells me he had a kink for getting farted in the face by girls. I pissed myself laughing and we became good friends for a while. Girl at the gym told me she was in an unhappy marriage and never loved her husband, and as soon as the kids finished school she was leaving him. Pretty sure I didn't even know her name. When I used to work in construction, I was on a project with this old guy that told me he was once accused of raping his daughter, but after an investigation was conducted it turned out it was his brother who committed the crime. Way too much information. Had another idiot showing everyone pictures on his phone of him and his stripper wife having a threesome. Can't say I miss the trades. I started working at a flower shop as a delivery driver, and on the very first day of training the woman I was paired with proceeded to tell me all about how she was still processing her parents' deaths. Went into great detail, explained the stresses of funeral arrangements and how she had to dress her mother for the viewing because her siblings weren't able to handle it. Even told me about a text message she believes she had gotten from her mother after she passed. I did my best to be sympathetic, but we were out on a 4-hour delivery drive and she definitely took the opportunity of a captive audience to dump a serious amount of baggage. At a certain point I just didn't know what to say anymore. Edit: her parents had passed away 3 years prior when we talked. I had to stay late when I was a manager as one of the female employees' parents were running late. She broke down to me about how she had been sexually abused by her best friend's father and that he had been doing it to her best friend for years. He was in jail after he did it to her, as she reported him, and sadly the daughter hated her for turning in her father as she thought it was normal behavior. She had only been working there for a few weeks at this point and we had probably only worked together a handful of times, so I really didn't know her that well yet, but I think she just needed someone to know she was struggling with it and someone to tell her it wasn't her fault and what he did was wrong. I was doing a service call at a house and just making small talk when the owner mentioned out of the blue that she's married to her uncle. I've been there twice, and both times they felt the need to tell me. It's kinda weird. I've heard a good bit of messed up things BC people disclose their secrets to me often, but I think probably the worst was at one of my jobs. 2 separate co-workers at different times told me that they were RD by their biological fathers for several years growing up. One of those women also told me about her relationship at that time and how he got her hooked on heroin, once gave her a bigger dose without her consent and proceeded to impregnate her. She wanted to keep the baby so bad because she'd always wanted to be a mom. But one night she got home from work late and he was drunk, high, and mad she wasn't there sooner, so he held her down and dosed her heavily and beat the hell out of her. She literally woke up miscarrying and he told her, "That's what you get, bitch." She cried and told me that it was all her fault for loving him so much and letting him do that to her. I helped her GTFO of that relationship as quickly as possible. The whole situation broke my heart. She said that if I wanted she would kill her parents so we can live at her house. I never went on a second date with her. Worked in a catalog store and sold a middle-aged lady a dictaphone after she sheepishly asked me if there was something she could use to record people without them knowing. It was weird, but who am I to judge? I just work the tills and suggest the items. However, she then decides to tell me she needs it, because she's being bullied or harassed in her home. So she buys the dictaphone and I think nothing of it. On my next shift, she is back in and demanding to speak to me about the device. First words out her mouth are, "Should there already be voices on it?" I was kind of weirded out and surprised to hear that the device had already been used. But then she leans across the counter and suddenly begins telling me, in whisper tone, that she is being attacked by spirits in her home and she needs proof. She plays the dictaphone without being prompted to do so. Anyway, there's nothing ghostly on it, just some mundane household sounds and EastEnders, a British soap opera. She became quite fond of me, came in repeatedly to tell me about the ghosts, but it just seemed so crazy that within like 2 shifts she had unloaded all her delusions. She even asked to know where I had went after moving away. My old colleagues obviously didn't tell her. She was a harmless lady, just a bit odd. First session with a new massage therapist. Me, relaxing and enjoying the massage. Her, did you know vaccines have bits of aborted fetuses in them? Me. Her, they don't want people to know, but there was an undercover video. Me, why would anyone put aborted fetus parts in a vaccine? Her, it's a preservative. Me, at a complete loss for words, saying the first thing that comes into my mind after what the actual fuck. That hardly seems cost effective. Her, yeah, I dunno, maybe I heard it wrong. She also told me all about her prior heroin addiction, bouts of homelessness, abusive previous marriage, and then tried to sell me some kind of $12,000 magnetic mat to lay on to heal all your things that need healing. After like a few hours of meeting a new co-worker at my job, one of the first things she told me was how much she hated her husband and how like twice a day she tells him how much she wants to divorce him. She also showed me a picture of her ex-husbands and laughed manically as she told me how she never loved him and that she just married him to spite his mom. I've met her husband she's with now and he's super cool and makes literally $5,000 a month at his job, so I was genuinely confused and terrified to work with her after that.